They did it. They actually did it. They made a Sonic movie that doesn't suck. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, and I just got back from an early screening of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and I just gotta say right up front, I'm stunned to say that it is good. I mean, really, I don't even mean that as a joke. Honestly, this is a well-built film that has great jokes, some really heartfelt moments, which is kind of bizarre, and some phenomenal cutting-edge CGI. And I want to take this apart piece by piece. Now, there will not be any spoilers towards the beginning of this video. At the very end, there is some stuff that I actually have to talk about because there is some major reveals that I really kind of want to fanboy about. Now let's just start off by talking about the most controversial aspect. The thing that a lot of people were definitely the most concerned about initially was how is it going to look? When the first trailers came out, I mean, how do I say this nicely? Sonic looked like nightmare fuel. He had tiny little kid's teeth, he had a pointy little set of features, he just did not look like actually Sonic. So they decided to go back and remake the entire film so he'd look like this. You know, the blue blur. I am very happy to report what they've done is a total overhaul that looks so freaking clean. There were so many times in the theater where I was just having my jaw drop because of all of the little tiny bits of like articulation. Whenever he's talking, there's all this little times where his eyes are squinting to tiny degrees. He has all this fur, and inside of his fur are quills. They will actually move individually as he's talking. What's really weird is his clothes. He's wearing these little like gloves. When he goes into the water, they become slightly more transparent because they're white and you can see his knuckles underneath. At times when he's like fighting or something like that, you'll see dirt clinging to his gloves. It looks so lifelike. It is crazy to me that they didn't somehow magically clone Sonic for this movie. Now, I do want to say something about this. There are a couple times where the illusion is broken. His best buddy in this film is a guy named Tom, a cop at this small town called Green Hills. And there are a few occasions where Sonic falls down or Sonic needs to like get helped or something, and Tom will pick him up. This actually happens a couple times in the film. Whenever he's holding the CGI Sonic, it does look a tiny bit odd. It almost looks like he's floating inside of his arms or something. Like they couldn't quite finish the CGI on like the shadowings and stuff. So it does look a little bit like a person pretending to hold Sonic. But other than those times, everything looks very, very good. Now I do want to tell you something that might kind of catch you off guard. This movie is very, very sad. I mean, that sounds like a complete non sequitur. This is a very, very serious film at parts. They show a very different origin for Sonic. They show a planet where he grew up. They showed about how he's being hunted forever. And most importantly, they show that Sonic is very, very lonely. Basically, as little tiny baby Sonic, the people who are taking care of him are unfortunately murdered. And yes, it shows it. And then their final words of his like, basically his like stepmom is never stop running, Sonic. Always hide. Go to any planet you need to teleport to in order to stay safe. And so Sonic lives his whole life in hiding, which makes him incredibly lonely. And this is not just something they say at the start, it is an underlying theme of the entire film is loneliness, of dealing with that like loss of connection. There are multiple scenes that show Sonic actually dealing with like the stress and trauma of existing completely outside of any sort of social structure. I mean, he doesn't know how to talk to people, he doesn't know when to shut up, which is like a joke that happens occasionally. But what's really interesting is he's actually very, very afraid of being abandoned. Once he makes friends with Tom, which their whole dynamic is such a fun little buddy cop thing, once they become buddies, there's a couple times where Sonic really expresses that he's afraid of leaving Tom. He's like, I've never had a friend, ever. I've literally never had an actual connection with somebody, and I'm afraid to go to the next planet. That is so cool. I'm so glad that they decided to write this in a way that is so good. All of the actors are so funny. There's so many great one-liners. There's so many times of like good little slapstick, but nobody steals the show more than Jim freaking Carrey. I'm buying this movie on Blu-ray just for Jim Carrey. I don't know if they used any CGI on him or if it's a lot of makeup, but he looks so much younger and so full of life. I mean, seriously, this is the 90s Jim Carrey that we all grew up with and loved back in his totally normal form. There are so many times where he randomly he puts on these dramatic headphones at one point. He's like dancing all crazy. He has all these different robots. One of my favorite things about Robotnik is definitely the fact that they kind of show a side of Robotnik that we never really get a chance to see, because in the games, Robotnik is such a blundering idiot. We don't get a chance to see how he is the dangerous Dr. Robotnik. Whereas in this version of him that's played by Jim Carrey, he is actually dangerous. One of the things I liked most is that he wears these gloves that have all these tiny buttons on them. They almost look like power gloves, and by pressing certain sequences of them, he commands his giant army of drones. And so something that's interesting is sometimes while he's plotting, he'll be like, oh, you'll never escape. He'll do all these like hundreds of tiny little gestures with his hands. It's so funny and it's so good, and it kind of actually conveys the fact that Dr. Robotnik is a genius, but definitely a hated genius. Anytime he's interacting with anybody, he is such a jerk. He has like a little minion that he actually a couple times punches in the face and stuff. He's just such a jerk, but since Dr. Robotnik is like a super genius billionaire, he kind of just gets away with it. There's so much in this film that I just really ate up, especially the fanfare. There's things like, the really famously awful drawing of Sonic, that's in the movie. There's times where they have like the classic songs coming back, but done in a more modern sense. Sonic makes jokes about eating chili dogs. But something I definitely didn't like about the movie is that I wish that they spent a little bit more time trying to establish the more outside characters. Like Tom, the cop guy, he has a wife, and when they're on screen together, it is such an organic love. Like, when they're talking to each other and stuff, they make jokes the way a couple makes jokes. They do things like when they're painting a room, they paint each other. Seriously, they make it look like such a believable love story. But she's barely in the movie. The movie itself is only like 90 minutes, and she's in the entire film for maybe 5 minutes. I wish they had more of her, because their dynamic is good. So much of this film was about like heart and passion and like human connection, so I wish we had more of two humans actually making a connection. I also do wish that they gave Tom a little bit more to fight with and stuff. Tom, for the most part, is kind of just hanging out with Sonic for the entire duration of the film. And the biggest gripe I have, and definitely one that I wish maybe they could solve it in a sequel, I do wish this movie had been longer. 90 minutes is very short. Now, the actual runtime is 141 minutes, but about 10 minutes of this is the credits. So because of it, from the time I sat down, since this was like a press screening thing, there weren't any trailers or anything, from the time I sat down to the time I stood up, felt so lightning fast. They kind of introduced Sonic, introduced the problems, introduced the universe, ending credits. It is a blisteringly paced movie, and at times I wish they had a couple more jokes, a couple more occasions to catch their breath, a couple more times to just enjoy being with Sonic. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, I do want to say it is a great film. You should absolutely see it. The more hardcore you are into Sonic, the more you're going to enjoy this. They have changed the lore some, they have added some stuff, but for the most part, this feels like what a Sonic movie actually should be. Okay, so buckle up, let's talk about the spoilers. I'm going to give you a 5-second spoiler warning. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, if you're still watching, you don't care about spoilers. Let's start off by talking about those after credit scenes. So in the trailer, we saw like this bald-headed Dr. Robotnik. That is the end of the film. That's like the very last thing we see in the film itself, is that Dr. Robotnik has been tricked and knocked onto the mushroom planet. And while he's there, he's clearly gone crazy, shaved his head, and gained a lot of weight from eating only mushrooms, becoming the fat and comical Dr. Robotnik we know and love. That was cool. I like the idea that it kind of opens up the idea of like the further misadventures of Robotnik. But the other thing is, tails! They actually had tails! At the very end, one of those ring teleporters opens up and Tails comes through with this weird tracking device. He looks so realistic. He looks so good. And the funniest thing is, I think that they got the original voice actor from the cartoon back because he sounds just like Tails. And the fact that he's like, we gotta find Sonic, I hope it's not too late. Everybody in the theater lost it. Like, people were like, holy hell, it's freaking Tails. We definitely are gonna get another one of these movies. And I'm totally gonna see it. The other spoiler I do want to talk about, though, is that I wish that we had had a little bit more of a direct confrontation between Dr. Robotnik and Sonic. For the most part, Dr. Robotnik just uses drones the entire movie. He has car drones, he has flying drones, he has missile drones, and all of these are very, very fun, but I wish that we saw more of a face-to-face conflict. We really only actually see Dr. Robotnik eyeball to eyeball with Sonic on like 2 occasions. Once in San Francisco and one during the final fights. And that's pretty much it. And I wish that we'd saw them a little bit more because Jim Carrey is so freaking funny. Sonic is so well done. I really wish that we'd had more chances for them to insult each other. There's a surprising amount of backstory to Dr. Robotnik and Sonic and Tom. I mean, everybody actually gets like almost a time to give a speech as to why they're here and why they're so jaded. And to me, that was such a pleasing treat. This is way better than I could have thought. I was expecting it to be decent, but this was a freaking fantastic time. When this comes out in like 5 or 6 days, I'm probably going to see it again because that was just that freaking funny. Thanks so much for watching this. Hopefully I didn't spoil anything for you, but go see the film. Go see it. You are going to have a blast. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh, something I wanted to say is, at the beginning of the movie, there was like, you know how like Marvel movies have that like big thing where they show like comic book pages turning and stuff, and it's like Marvel Films. They did that for Sega. At the beginning of the movie, it said like Sega Films, and it showed a bunch of like clips of like Jet Set Radio and Streets of Rage and Sonic, and it basically kind of conveyed that maybe in the future, if this is profitable enough, they'll start doing more movies based on Sega franchises, which to me, I'm totally down for that. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.